Hey guys, tonight we drift into one of those stories that feels like it was written with sleep in mind. Softly strange, faintly magical, and gently confusing in a way your half dreaming brain will appreciate. We're stepping into The King of the Golden Mountain, a tale from the Brothers Grimm that mixes merchants, curses, and curious little bargains that sound suspiciously like something you'd regret signing in real life. You probably won't survive this, at least not with your attention intact, but that's the whole point. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling sociable, let me know your location and local time down in the comments. It's oddly charming to see a scroll of sleepy people scattered across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin not with kings or castles, but with a merchant. His life is comfortable, though not extravagant, the kind of steady rhythm where you imagine he measures success in barrels of grain and the occasional well-roasted goose at a festival. He has a son, bright-eyed and curious, whose world feels both safe and promising. But, as fairy tales love to remind us, the universe tends to shake the snow globe just when everyone gets cozy. One morning, the merchant faces ruin. His business collapses like a sand castle against the tide. In some versions of the tale, it's a failed venture with foreign traders. In others, it's simply bad luck. Storms, theft, maybe too much trust in a cousin who swore he was good with numbers. Historians point out that in the early 1800s, when the Grimms collected this story, merchant families really did live with constant uncertainty. One bad harvest or a ship delayed by weather could spell disaster. A quirky tidbit, some records suggest that smaller German towns held yearly forgiveness markets, where debts could be renegotiated, almost like an economic reset button. Imagine if your credit card company hosted a cheerful village fair where they canceled half your bill in exchange for a sausage roll. Yet, in the story, no such relief arrives. The merchant is ruined, and his family stares at an uncertain future. That's when the son, curious and perhaps too trusting, wanders beyond the village fields and meets someone, or something, odd. A little black man, the size of a child but older in expression, steps from behind a tree. He offers the boy a deal. He can restore the father's fortune if, after 12 years, the son follows him into a land the boy cannot yet imagine. Here's the scholarly debate. Some folklorists argue this little black man represents a shadowy remnant of older Germanic household spirits, protective but tricksy, like brownies or kobolds. Others say he's simply a morality device, a stand-in for temptation and the dangers of shortcuts. And some can't resist pointing out that he resembles the archetype of the trickster merchant, a supernatural tax collector waiting at the edge of every bargain. But to the boy, none of this is clear. You can picture him, standing there in the dappled light of a quiet wood, torn between fear and hope. He knows his father is ruined. He also knows fairy tale logic, maybe not consciously, but deep in his bones, that when a strange figure offers help, you should probably at least listen, even if you regret it later. He agrees. The bargain is sealed not with parchment, not with wax or quill, but with the simplest of gestures, a nod, a hand extended, a quiet yes. And from that moment, the rhythm of his life shifts. The next day, his father is prosperous again. Wagons arrive laden with goods, Customers crowd the stall. The house fills once more with the clink of coin and the smell of bread that isn't just crust ends. You can imagine the relief, a sigh carried on the breeze that even the neighbors notice. Yet in the boy's heart, the clock begins ticking. 12 years is a long time when you're young, but as seasons pass, autumn's leaf crunch, winter's candlelight, spring's muddy shoes, the number shrinks. He grows older, watching his father laugh again, his mother hum in the kitchen, his own hands learn the trade. But sometimes when he lies in bed at night, he wonders about the figure in the woods. Did he really promise something? Was it binding, or was it only a dream fed by hunger and worry? Folklorists can't agree here either. Was the bargain always meant to be tragic, or was it simply the boy's journey towards adulthood, packaged in the wrapping paper of myth? One scholar compared it to the way we trade time for stability, youth for responsibility. Another, more humorously, suggested the tale is basically a medieval lease agreement, 12 years rent-free, then hand over your soul. But for now, you stand with the boy, just on the edge of this deal. Life is good again, but shadows flicker at the corners, reminding you promises, even quiet ones, tend to come due.
The 12 years slip by with that deceptive speed you only notice in hindsight. At first, each season feels slow and distinct, the soft crunch of frost underfoot in winter, the cheerful splash of spring puddles, the sleepy buzz of midsummer bees, and the autumn air laced with the smell of wood smoke and baking apples. The merchant's family thrives again, their fortunes rebuilt almost miraculously. Neighbors shake their heads in polite disbelief because no one recovers that quickly without some kind of secret sauce, or in this case, a suspiciously convenient woodland pact. You, as the merchant's son, grow tall and sure-footed. People greet you with respect, and the once worried lines around your parents' eyes soften. Life seems almost normal, almost safe, almost. But 12 years is both an eternity and the blink of an eye. The little black man never appears again, not once during all that time, and that absence becomes its own kind of haunting. The morning of the final year, you wake with a weight pressing at your ribs, not the weight of blankets, but of time. And sure enough, on a quiet evening, just as the sun dips behind the fields, he is there again. The strange little figure looks exactly the same as before, not older, not younger, not changed by a single day, as if he's been waiting outside the frame of your life, patient as a paused film. He gestures, no words needed, and you follow. Here's where historians get playful. Some argue this figure reflects remnants of older mythic beings tied to crossroads or bargains, a Germanic echo of Hermes or Loki, the cosmic tricksters who delight in rearranging human plans. Others suggest the detail of his unchanged appearance is meant to unsettle. He is outside time, a reminder that bargains made in youth do not fade, even if memory blurs. And then there's the odd academic footnote that points out how the little black man sometimes morphs into other characters in different regions' versions, sometimes a sorcerer, sometimes a devil, sometimes even a strange monk. Folklore is messy, like a story whispered through too many generations of bedtime yawns. The bargain demands fulfillment, so you are taken, spirited away, not through violence, but through a peculiar, almost bureaucratic efficiency. No thunderclaps, no smoke, just a tug, and suddenly you are no longer home. You arrive at a shore. Before you, a ship rocks gently, sails slack but waiting. It looks ordinary enough, a merchant vessel built for trade, with ropes creaking softly and gulls wheeling overhead. But when you step aboard, the air shifts. The ship lifts anchor without hands, sails fill without wind, and the deck seems to hum with a quiet energy, like a cat purring under your feet. And here, too, we find our quirky tidbit. In the early 19th century, river and sea travel were daily realities for Germans, yet ships also carried heavy symbolic weight. They represented fate itself, carrying you from one life stage to another. Folklorists note that enchanted ships appear again and again in stories across Europe, from Norse myths of magical sea dragons to Celtic coracles that sail themselves toward the other world. Some even claim these vessels were metaphors for the coffin, your final ship. Sleep tight with that thought. But in this story, your ship isn't ominous. It's strangely gentle. You lean against the railing, the salt air damp on your lips, and feel a peace that surprises you. Yes, you are leaving everything you know. Yes, your parents are gone from your sight. And yes, the little Lackman waits somewhere unseen. But there's a serenity in surrendering to a current you can't control. The journey stretches across days, or maybe hours. It's hard to tell when the sea itself seems enchanted. Time folds, horizons bend, and you find yourself lulled by the rhythm of waves. At night, the stars are so sharp they look like pinholes punched in the skycloth. You think you see patterns, perhaps the great hunter, perhaps a fox chasing chickens, perhaps your parents' trade scales tipped permanently in your favor. Here's the scholarly debate. Where exactly is this ship taking you? Some believe the Golden Mountain represents a literal kingdom, a far-off land wealthy beyond imagining. Others argue it's symbolic, a kingdom of maturity, the son stepping into adulthood's strange obligations. A few even whisper that it's not a place at all, but a state of being, an inward golden mountain you climb with every choice and loss. For now you stand at the ship's rail, the sea stretching infinitely in every direction. Ahead lies land, mist curling like spun wool around peaks that glimmer faintly gold. Whatever waits there, your quiet journey has only just begun.
You wake one morning to silence so deep it feels padded, like the whole world has been wrapped in blankets. The ship glides not into a bustling harbor, but toward a coast that seems half hidden by mist. Peaks shimmer faintly beyond, their slopes veined with something that glitters like sunlight caught in stone. You realize this must be the Golden Mountain, though in truth it looks less like a kingdom and more like a dream you once half remembered. The ship halts without anchor. You step ashore, and as soon as your feet touch the damp sand, the vessel drifts away, as if politely excusing itself from further obligations. It fades into the fog, leaving you alone. Ahead rises a path, narrow and winding, hemmed in by pines. Their needles whisper as you pass, though whether from wind or from secretive conversations, you can't be sure. The air is so still you can hear your own breathing, exaggerated like the sound effects department forgot to add anything else. At the end of the path lies a castle, perched against the slope like it grew there instead of being built. Its windows glow faintly, though no fire flickers behind them. You approach with the uneasy awareness of someone who suspects they're either about to inherit a kingdom or be offered the world's most suspicious free sample. Inside, the silence continues. You wander through long halls where tapestries ripple despite the absence of draft. You trail your fingers across cool stone, noting carvings of lions, dragons, and peculiar little foxes that grin as though they know something you don't. Finally, in the innermost chamber, you find her, a princess, lying on a bed draped in gauze so fine it looks spun from dew. Her hair fans out like autumn leaves, her hands folded over her chest. She doesn't stir, though you notice her breathing, slow, steady, as though she's been napping for centuries and intends to clock in a few more hours. The moment carries weight. Folklorists argue endlessly about whether she's meant to be a literal enchantment, a princess cursed into sleep, or a symbol of potential, waiting to be awakened by a stranger stepping into adulthood. One curious tidbit: in some lesser-known variants, it isn't a princess, but a statue that comes to life, raising questions about whether the Grimms sanitized details from older, stranger traditions. Scholars can't quite agree whether this awakening is about romance, destiny, or just the convenience of adding a leading lady into the plot. Still, here you are. You reach out. You don't kiss her, that's another story's shtick, but you do speak her name. You don't know how you know it, but this is fairy tale logic. Sometimes the mouth knows things before the brain does. Her eyes flutter open. She doesn't gasp, doesn't sit upright in a melodramatic swoon. She simply blinks at you like someone startled awake from a nap they definitely didn't mean to take. "You're late," she murmurs, though you've no idea how she measured your timing. It's at this point that humor sneaks in. Imagine traveling across enchanted seas, guided by mystical bargains, only to be met with the same tone someone uses when you show up to brunch 15 minutes behind schedule. Still, she rises, graceful as if her limbs have remembered movement after centuries of pause. And the castle responds. The walls brighten, the air warms, a faint hum of life returns. Servants appear, as though they had been standing invisible in corners, waiting for her eyelids to lift. And just like that, you are not merely a visitor, you are her chosen companion. She accepts your presence without question, introduces you as if you've always belonged here, and the quiet kingdom of the Golden Mountain begins to stir. But you notice something strange. The little black man who guided you here is gone, vanished. No applause, no smug reminder of your bargain, just absence. It leaves you uneasy, because debts never really disappear. They just wait for you to stop looking. The princess smiles at you, warm but mysterious, and gestures toward the throne room. You don't feel ready for crowns or titles or whatever this place demands, but fairy tales rarely pause to ask for your comfort level. You follow.
The throne room glows with an odd golden light, though no torches burn and no windows are open. It feels as though the mountain itself is pulsing with a heartbeat, and the castle has merely borrowed its rhythm. The princess, now wide awake, alert, and apparently more comfortable in royal gowns than in bedclothes, guides you forward. Her steps barely echo, but yours clomp loudly, like you're the only one in squeaky shoes during a funeral procession. At the end of the hall, two thrones wait, one already warmed by centuries of dust, the other draped with a robe that looks suspiciously like it was tailored just for you. The princess sits, motions for you to take your place beside her, and with that single gesture, your reign begins. No coronation, no priest waving incense, no awkward speeches about working together as a kingdom. Just sit here, you belong now. Here's a mainstream fact. The Brothers Grimm were fascinated by the idea of sudden ascension. In many of their collected tales, characters go from obscurity to royalty in the space of a single encounter. Folklorists suggest this reflects social mobility anxiety of the time, people dreaming that fortune could change overnight, while simultaneously fearing how fragile such luck might be. You sit, and suddenly the room fills. Courtiers glide in as though they've been waiting just off stage. They bow, their eyes curious. They don't ask where you came from or why you're here. In fairy tales, questions like that are rude, like asking someone their credit score at dinner. Instead, they accept the princess's decision, and by extension, you. For a while, life seems almost cozy. Meals are plentiful, banquets glitter with music, and the princess treats you with a mix of warmth and amusement. She has a knack for gentle sarcasm, occasionally teasing your earthbound merchant upbringing. You might blush at her stories of silk and sorcery, but she also listens when you reminisce about hearth fires and markets that smelled of cheese and leather boots. A quirky tidbit emerges here. In some versions of the story, the princess had been cursed into sleep by an enchanter, jealous of her beauty. In others, her slumber is unexplained, simply a fairy tale given, like a cat always landing on its feet. Folklorists still debate whether she's a passive figure rescued by fate or an active queen who merely needed the right moment to reawaken. Either way, she adapts quickly to her new life at your side.
The kingdom too awakens. Fields grow fertile again, fountains run clear, and peasants praise their rulers with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for free bread and tax forgiveness. You walk the gardens, marveling at hedges shaped into griffins and deer, the scent of roses in thyme weaving into your clothes. There's a pleasant monotony in these early days of ruling. Meetings where advisers drone on, feasts where you're expected to nod regally, evenings where the princess recounts legends of the mountains past. And yet there's a whisper at the edges of your mind. Remember the deal, the figure in the woods, the 12 years of promised debt? He hasn't appeared again, but debts aren't erased just because you're busy with royal paperwork. You almost imagine him in the shadows, smirking, as you sign decrees and attend dances. Still, you allow yourself to sink into this life. You laugh at feasts, you stumble through ceremonies, you even learn to sit on the throne without shifting uncomfortably every 5 minutes. The princess grows fond of you, and her fondness feels genuine, not just convenient. Historians argue over this section of the tale. Was the son truly content, or was the kingdom always meant as a gilded cage? Some read it as a reward for his bargain, others as the trap itself, dressed in gold leaf. But for now, under vaulted ceilings and beside a queen who smiles at your clumsy jokes, you let yourself believe in the peace of it. After all, if life hands you a throne and a castle, it feels impolite to complain about the upholstery.
Time drifts like candle wax in the golden mountain. Days blur into weeks, weeks into years, and before you quite realize it, 12 years pass in this gilded rhythm of courtly life. You reign quietly, not as a conqueror or tyrant, but as a man who still remembers the smell of his father's market stall and the scratch of barley sacks against his hands. The people like you for that reason. You rule like someone who still understands the value of bread over jewels, of warmth over pomp. The princess is your partner in every sense. Graceful where you stumble, witty where you pause, indulgent of your still human appetite for small comforts. She laughs when you prefer plain roasted chicken over swan and saffron sauce. And once she even joins you sneaking bread rolls out of the kitchen late at night, skirts bundled like an accomplice. This reign is quiet, and in some ways, suspiciously so. Fairy tales often leap from catastrophe to catastrophe. Yet here the drama seems to have pressed the snooze button. A folkloric fact. Many stories in the Grimm's collection include these long stretches of prosperity, but always as prelude. 12 years of bliss are rarely a gift, they are a setup. And indeed, you begin to notice the silence beneath the prosperity. No enemies challenge your throne, no famines strike the land. It's as though the world has pressed pause on chaos, granting you this lull, which, if you've been paying attention to fairy tales, should make you deeply nervous. Still, you live those years fully. You walk gardens heavy with lilacs in spring, attend harvest dances in autumn, and fall asleep each winter to the princess humming some tune older than memory. You hold court, nodding as peasants tell their petitions, sometimes absurd, a goat that refuses to stop eating hats, a miller convinced his wheel turns backwards in protest. You make decisions, sometimes wise, sometimes clumsy, but always guided by that grounding sense of being, at heart, still a merchant's son. Here's a quirky tidbit. Folklorists note that 12 years recurs constantly in folklore. It's long enough to feel like permanence, yet short enough to end abruptly. In medieval calendars, 12 marked not only years, but full cycles of harvests, almost like a cosmic lease period. The number whispers, enjoy it, but don't get attached. And then there's the debate. Folklorists can't agree if the Golden Mountain is truly a kingdom or simply a magical holding pen. Was this reign a genuine reward,
a glimpse of the life the son might have lived, or was it simply a distraction meant to fatten his contentment before the bill came due? 12 years pass. You are no longer the wide-eyed boy who followed a stranger into the woods. You are a man, seasoned by laughter, softened by partnership, respected as a ruler. And yet, as 1 year fades into the next, something shifts. The silence of your bargain begins to hum louder, like a faint buzzing you can't swat away. On a quiet morning, the princess finds you staring out over the golden slopes. "What's on your mind?" she asks, though she must already know. You shrug, offering some half-joke about missing the taste of cheap market sausages, but the truth lies heavier. You wonder when, not if, the shadow from your past will step out again. And deep inside, you sense that your reign, however gentle, was never the end of the journey. It was only the interlude.
The call to return home doesn't arrive with trumpets or omens. It begins quietly, like a thought you can't quite shake. You wake one morning, the air in the palace gardens sweet with early blossoms, and you feel a tug, not of duty to your kingdom, but of memory. The smell of bread baking somewhere far away, the laughter of neighbors leaning across fences, your father's hands rough with trade. The Golden Mountain is radiant, yes, but it isn't home. You mention this to the princess over supper, half apologetic as though homesickness were some sort of weakness. She studies you with those steady eyes, the corners of her mouth quirking as though she already knew this moment would come. "If you must go," she says softly, "then go. But remember, what is golden here may turn dull out there." It's an odd blessing, half warning, half affection. Still, you resolve to make the journey. Leaving the Golden Mountain feels strange. The courtiers bow, untroubled, as if kings vanish all the time and no one finds it odd. The castle gates swing open for you without resistance. You half expect the little black man to appear in the shadows, arms crossed, ready to demand his due. But no figure steps forward. The silence unsettles you more than confrontation would. The road winds downward, through forests humming with unseen life. Birds flit between branches, though their songs sound almost mocking, like gossip you aren't allowed to overhear. The path lengthens until time itself blurs. Fairy tale travel is like that. One moment you're in gilded halls, the next you're trudging through mud, wondering why you didn't pack better shoes. Finally, after days or maybe weeks, the landscape softens into the familiar. Rolling fields, smoke rising from chimneys, the crooked roofs of your childhood village. You walk among them like a ghost, recognizing everything, but realizing nothing recognizes you. You pass the baker's shop where you once bought rolls still warm from the oven. The baker's hair is grayer now, his steps slower. He doesn't look twice at you. Children run down alleys you once knew, laughing at games you once played, but their laughter passes through you. Even your old homestands, shutters neat, garden tended, but strangers sit at the table inside. Folklorists point out how often tales linger on this motif, the unrecognized return. Heroes who come back transformed, older, stranger, shaped by magic, often find that home does not know them anymore. It's a way of saying you can't step into the same river twice, no matter how much you want to. A quirky tidbit, in some rural German towns, there were legends of soldiers returning after years at war, only to discover no one remembered them. Villagers explained it by saying they had been claimed by the mountain, a phrase meaning both literally swallowed by the hills and figuratively erased from the community's story. And the scholarly debate? Some argue this moment is the true heart of the tale, not the kingdom or bargains. Is the Golden Mountain just a metaphor for adulthood? And when you return home changed, is it natural that your childhood world doesn't fit anymore? Others counter that it's a warning. Prosperity bought by strange deals
always comes with alienation, leaving you stranded between two lives. As you walk the streets, unnoticed, unrecognized, you feel a pang of loneliness sharper than any blade. You once belonged here, but belonging has quietly expired, like milk left too long on the shelf. You pause outside the village well, watching faces you know but who don't know you, and for the first time since stepping into that forest 12 years ago, you wonder, was this journey ever meant to bring you home? Or has home become the one place you can no longer reach?
You linger in the village square, trying to decide whether to laugh or cry. Nobody recognizes you. Not the baker, not the miller, not the gaggle of neighbors who once measured your height against the doorframe. You are a stranger in your own story. And if that weren't unsettling enough, fate decides this is the perfect moment for mischief. Across the square stands a merchant you don't know, a man with the kind of smug grin that practically begs for subtitles reading "Villain in Progress." He hawks his goods loudly, his voice cutting through the air like a badly tuned violin. The villagers gather eagerly around him, buying trinkets and silks as though he's handing out secrets of eternal youth. Something about him prickles at the back of your neck. You step closer. He's telling tales of journeys, of kingdoms far away, of treasures that seem oddly familiar. Too familiar. He's speaking of a golden mountain, of a castle where a princess sits in silks, of a kingdom ruled by a noble king. He gestures dramatically, soaking in admiration. And then, to your horror, he claims it was him. He was the one who ruled. He was the one who woke the princess. You nearly choke. Here's a folkloric fact. Imposters pop up constantly in fairy tales. From false brides to stolen identities, they're the narrative equivalent of spam emails. Annoying, predictable, but weirdly necessary to keep the plot spicy. The Brothers Grimm collected dozens of stories where someone pretends to be the rightful hero, usually only to be exposed through some dramatic trial. The villagers, of course, eat it up. They clap him on the back, call him a marvel, and offer him their finest mead. Nobody questions how a man who looks like he's never missed a meal or worn a crown could possibly have lived the life he describes. You try to interrupt, to correct him, but he waves you off with the casual disdain of someone shooing a stray dog. And here comes the quirky tidbit in some versions of this tale. The false merchant doesn't just claim your story. He steals your possessions, even your magical tools, with a sleight of hand that would make a Vegas magician jealous. He doesn't just erase you, he edits you out of your own script. The scholarly debate around this moment is surprisingly heated. Some argue the impostor represents society's indifference to truth. People prefer a loud liar over a quiet hero. Others suggest it's about the fragility of reputation. If you disappear for too long, anyone can step in and rewrite your narrative. And a few point out, rather cheekily, that it's also a warning about poor branding. You should have trademarked your golden mountain before leaving. The impostor smiles, lifts a goblet, and declares he will soon return to his kingdom, to his beloved princess, to rule once more. The villagers cheer, and you, standing there with dust on your boots and no proof in your pockets, feel the ground shift beneath you. You've been erased. The impostor climbs into a carriage surrounded by admirers. The wheels rattle away, carrying your story, your wife, your throne, all stolen. And there you stand in the square, ignored, forgotten, stripped of everything but your frustration and the faint echo of a promise long ago. It's almost funny if you squint at it the right way. 12 years of reigning with dignity, undone by one loudmouth with a good sales pitch. If only kingdoms were run like markets, you think, you'd have demanded receipts. But fairy tales don't issue refunds.
You trail after the impostor's carriage until your legs ache, dust clinging to your clothes like unwanted relatives at a holiday dinner. The road bends toward the castle you once called home, and your heart tightens at every familiar stone. The towers rise in the distance, gray and gold against the dimming sky, and for a moment you allow yourself the naive thought that the princess will see through the fraud instantly. She'll recognize you, she'll laugh at the ridiculous pretender, and everything will return to the way it was. Except, of course, this isn't a bedtime story about happy shortcuts. This is the part where things get sticky. The castle gates are already open, guards bustling with a kind of ceremonial energy. The impostor strides through, puffed up like a rooster at a county fair. He waves to the crowd as though the universe itself had nominated him Best Supporting Actor in someone else's life. And the princess, your princess, emerges to greet him. She pauses. Her eyes search his face. For half a heartbeat, you see confusion flicker there, the faint recognition that something is off. Then, to your horror, she welcomes him. Not warmly, perhaps, but with enough courtesy to sting. She invites him inside. It's a grim fact of folklore. Imposter scenes rarely go smoothly. In The Goose Girl, for example, a princess is replaced by her maid and spends half the story tending geese before anyone realizes the switch. Audiences always yell, "How could they not tell?" But the answer is simple. Fairy tales thrive on dramatic irony. Everyone but the characters can see the obvious. You creep closer, hugging the shadows. The impostor spins tales of his long absence, each lie more elaborate than the last. He blames bandits, storms, enchantments, you name it. If he had claimed that he'd been abducted by a talking hedgehog with a pension plan, they probably would have nodded along. The princess listens, expression unreadable, and finally declares that a celebration will be held. After all, their king has returned. Your knuckles tighten against the stone wall. The impostor drinks from your goblet, sits on your chair, accepts praise that once belonged to you. He even makes a clumsy attempt at royal dignity, which mostly looks like he swallowed a broom. And yet, the court believes him. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some folklorists point out that imposters like this often serve as foil characters, not real threats, but mirrors that highlight what the true hero lacks. In this case, you lack presence. You lack the proof of your own story. In modern terms, it's like trying to log into your old email after forgetting the password, only now someone else is in your inbox, responding to all your friends as though they were you. Scholars still debate what role the princess plays in this moment. Is she deceived? Is she testing the impostor? Or does she secretly know, waiting for the real king to step forward with proof? No consensus exists. The one German folklorist once grumbled that she was simply sick of waiting and decided to improvise. You whisper into the evening air, desperate for her to glance your way, for her to notice the dust-stained figure beyond the courtyard torches. But she doesn't. She disappears into the hall beside the impostor, and the doors close with a heavy thud. The sound rings in your ears. You are locked out of your own story. And yet, you can't leave. You remain there in the twilight, leaning against the cold wall, muttering sarcastic commentary to nobody but yourself. Sure, let's all just applaud the guy with better posture. A guard yawns nearby, oblivious. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird calls, as though mocking you with its perfect timing. You've come this far. You won't turn away now. The night drapes itself over the castle, soft and cool, while you remain outside the walls like an afterthought in your own bedtime story. Torches flicker on the battlements, their smoke curling into the stars, and you press closer to the stones, wondering how in the world you went from Golden King to unwanted background character in less than 24 hours. Inside, laughter rolls from the hall, thick and boisterous. You imagine the impostor raising a goblet, spilling half of it on your old tunic, and telling jokes you never would have told. You picture the princess seated near him, polite smile in place, her thoughts impossible to read. You can almost hear the clinking of plates, the sweet notes of music drifting on the night air. You take a breath. You need a plan. Here's a folkloric fact. In many European tales, the true hero spends a stretch in disguise before reclaiming their rightful place. Think of Odysseus sneaking back into Ithaca as a beggar before revealing himself. Or the Norse sagas, where kings sometimes wander in rags until the right moment arrives. Disguise isn't humiliation. It's a test of patience, a waiting game where wit outpaces brute force. So you wait. By dawn, the impostor parades about the courtyard, already comfortable in his kingdom. He tosses coins to the people like candy at a parade. You watch, jaw tight as children cheer. He's got your crown perched on his head, crookedly at that, and you mutter, if hats could talk, that one would be filing a complaint. You step forward to challenge him, but a guard shoves you back. Dust clouds around your feet. The impostor doesn't even glance your way. It's as if you've been erased twice, once by his lies and once by everyone else's willingness to believe them. A quirky tidbit slips into your thoughts. In some versions of this tale, impostors are tested by riddles or contests. They're asked to prove themselves through impossible tasks, guessing secrets, recalling forgotten details. You have hope someone will demand he explain your private joke with the castle goose. Spoiler, he wouldn't get it. But here's the scholarly debate. Why don't these stories allow for quick recognition? Why must the rightful hero suffer humiliation first? Some argue it's moral seasoning. The tale reminds listeners that pride alone doesn't win back honor. Others insist it reflects political anxieties. Rulers needed constant performance to remain real in the eyes of their people. If you stopped showing up, someone else could step into your role. You linger on that thought as the day drags on. Servants bustle around you, ignoring your protests. Merchants gossip. A minstrel even begins composing a ballad in the impostor's honor, which makes you want to trip him into a mud puddle for artistic dishonesty. But you hold back. Timing matters. Night comes again, and you curl up under a tree, your cloak thin against the dew. The castle looms, filled with warmth and light you no longer own, and still you wait. The moment will come when the impostor trips over his own lies. Until then, you endure the shadows, whispering sarcastic asides to yourself like the world's most underpaid commentator.
Morning stirs, and you're still camped outside the castle like the world's least glamorous squatter. The dew has soaked your cloak, your stomach grumbles like an uncooperative drum, and you swear one of the guards threw crumbs at you last night just to see if you'd chase them like a pigeon. The impostor, meanwhile, has upgraded his performance. Today, he rides through the town on your horse. Yes, your horse. The one who once nuzzled your palm and stole apples from your pocket. Now the beast looked perfectly content carrying that blowhard in circles, as if loyalty were just a forgotten menu option. The crowd cheers as he tosses out more coins, and you mutter something unprintable under your breath. Here's a folkloric fact. Imposters in fairy tales nearly always overplay their hand. They make themselves too grand, too loud, too glittery, until the seams show. Their arrogance becomes their undoing. Think of The Goose Girl, where the false bride grows lazy while the real princess endures quietly until the truth cracks open. Folklore loves balance. Patience outlasts pride. But patience doesn't exactly fill your stomach. By midday, you've scavenged half a crust from a baker's windowsill, earning yourself a glare. Some king you are, you mutter to yourself, chewing like it's the world's toughest steak. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. In some lesser-known versions of The King of the Golden Mountain, the impostor isn't even a stranger. He's a servant or advisor who betrays the king. Folklorists debate whether this detail was cut in the Grimm version for simplicity or whether it reflected a deeper fear of betrayal from those closest to power. Personally, you'd vote for fear of paperwork. Servant imposters would make inheritance laws even messier. The scholarly debate thickens here. What exactly does the impostor represent? Is he society's gullibility made flesh? Is he the shadow self of the hero, embodying what you might have become if greed had been your compass? Or is he just comic relief stretched too far? Scholars still argue, some calling him symbolic, others dismissing him as a stock villain. From your shadowy vantage, you begin to notice cracks. The impostor's stories don't align. Yesterday, he claimed he returned from 12 years in the wilderness. Today, he swears he conquered 3 kingdoms abroad. His dates wobble, his names shift. You'd think someone would notice, but people rarely question a man holding a crown. And the princess? She watches him closely, her brow furrowed in quiet thought. She doesn't seem fooled, not entirely. It's in the small things. The way her gaze lingers when he stumbles over a detail. The way her hands clasp tightly in her lap. A flicker of doubt remains alive, and you cling to it as though it were a lifeline tossed to you in stormy seas. Night returns, and with it, your resolve hardens. The impostor may sit in your hall, may drink from your goblet, may pretend to wear your life like a costume, but his threads are already fraying. You only need to be patient a little longer. And so, under the moon, you whisper into the wind, "Go ahead, fraud. Dig your own hole. I'll be here to hand you the shovel." By the third morning, you've almost gotten used to your new role, the kingdom's most disgruntled wall ornament. You've learned which guard is most likely to doze off at dawn, which kitchen boy sneaks cheese wedges out the back door, and which servant is secretly terrible at sweeping. Seriously, you could build sandcastles with the dust left behind. Inside the castle, the impostor is staging another grand performance. Today he presides over court, holding an audience with villagers and nobles. You slip closer, half hidden among the columns, your ears straining for every word. The impostor sits tall, crown sliding sideways on his head like it's auditioning for gravity. He gestures broadly, promising lower taxes, higher feasts, and, get this, new fountains carved entirely from chocolate. The crowd cheers like he just invented weekends. Here's a folkloric fact. Impostors in tales often rely on spectacle. Instead of steady governance, they dazzle with impossible promises. Medieval chronicles even tell of rulers who claimed miraculous powers, only to be exposed as frauds when their miracles ran dry. People love to believe in a show, even if it crumbles under daylight. You almost laugh out loud when a villager asks how exactly he plans to import rivers of chocolate. The impostor waves dismissively, mumbling something about mystical suppliers in the West. The crowd unbelievably nods along. You mutter under your breath, next he'll say he invented TikTok. A quirky tidbit. In some variations of this tale, the impostor doesn't just lie, he tries to marry the princess outright. That twist raises questions about her role. Is she complicit, biding her time, or simply forced to play along until the truth emerges? Scholars still argue, pointing out that her silence in the Grimm version might not mean belief. It could mean strategy. You study her now. She sits poised, her expression calm, but her eyes flick toward the impostor's hands, his words, his crooked crown. It's as if she's gathering evidence for a trial only she can see. You cling to that thought, relief washing over you like cool water. She hasn't forgotten. And yet your frustration boils. The crowd cheers for him again, rising to their feet. The impostor soaks it in like a sunflower in July. You want to storm in, shout your name, demand recognition. But then you picture the guards' spears, the laughter, the jeers. Not yet. The moment hasn't ripened. Scholarly debates swirl in your head while you linger in the shadows. Some argue impostor tales remind audiences to value truth over appearances. Others say they reflect the fragility of identity, how easily it can be stolen if not fiercely protected. And one camp insists these episodes are simply narrative padding, a way to stretch the story before the inevitable triumph. You sigh, rubbing your temples. Narrative padding or not, you're starving, tired, and dangerously close to throwing a shoe at your doppelganger. But you hold back, whispering sarcastically to yourself, patience? Heroes in fairy tales always win by patience. Heroes in fairy tales clearly never had stomach cramps. And so, under the vaulted ceiling of your stolen hall, you wait a little longer, knowing the impostor's fabrications are unraveling thread by thread.
The castle settles into a rhythm, and you, the ghost of its true king, learn to slip between shadows like an unwanted draft. Servants bustle about with trays of bread and wine, guards shuffle at their posts, and the impostor struts around like a rooster convinced he invented sunrise. Today, he's hosting a feast. Tables are heaped with roasted meats, fruits glistening like jewels, and enough pastries to bribe an entire monastery. You creep closer, watching through a crack in the hall's great doors. The impostor lifts his goblet and bellows a toast, something about his bravery, his sacrifices, his unmatched wisdom. His voice echoes so loudly it nearly shakes the chandelier loose. Here's a folkloric fact. Banquets in fairy tales are rarely just banquets. They're stages for revelation. In Cinderella, it's a ball that reveals her true self. In Sleeping Beauty, a feast sparks the curse. Folklore loves to turn meal times into plot twists, which honestly feels right. After all, who hasn't had a family dinner suddenly spiral into drama? The impostor's lies grow bolder as the night unfolds. He claims he tamed dragons with a glance, convinced the sea to part for his carriage, and once wrestled a mountain troll who begged for mercy. The courtiers gasp and applaud. You smack your forehead softly against the doorframe. If he says he invented bread, I'm leaving, you whisper. A quirky tidbit, some regional versions of this tale give the impostor magical items of his own, a false wand, a counterfeit ring that mimic the hero's power. Folklorists note how often fake magic mirrors fake identity, blurring the line between truth and performance. Here, though, all the impostor has is bluster, and apparently that's enough. Your eyes drift to the princess. She sits silent, her gaze sharp, as though weighing every syllable. When the impostor falters, mixing up which dragon he allegedly tamed, her lips twitch ever so slightly, the ghost of a smile she hides behind her goblet. She knows. She must know. Scholars still debate the princess's role in this tale. Is she the passive figure Grimm painted her to be, or an active agent gathering proof? Some modern retellings argue she orchestrates the impostor's downfall, setting the stage for the rightful king's return. If that's the case, you think, she's playing the long game, and you'd better keep up. The feast roars on, but the impostor stories grow thinner. Guests laugh a little too loudly, glance sideways, shift in their seats. You can feel the tide turning. Not tonight, but soon.
His crown tilts, his voice cracks, his facade begins to splinter. And there you remain in the shadows, aching with hunger, shoulders heavy with exhaustion, yet fueled by the smallest ember of hope. You whisper to yourself, "Go ahead, fraud, spin your tales. When the curtain drops, I'll still be here." The music swells, torches flare, and the hall echoes with cheers for the impostor king. But beneath it all, a silence waits, coiled and patient. You can almost hear the story itself taking a breath, readying for the unraveling to come.
Dawn arrives with a hush, the kind of gray stillness that makes even birds think twice about chirping. You wake on the edge of the courtyard, stiff and sore, having used a bundle of hay as your mattress. There's a patch of straw stuck to your hair, and you mutter, "Ah yes, the royal pillow menu. 5 stars." Inside the castle, a stir begins. Word trickles out. The impostor is planning a grand announcement. You slip through the gates behind a wagon, heart thudding. In the great hall, banners hang heavy, torches blaze, and the impostor stands proudly on the dais, crown wobbling on his head, as if resisting his ownership. The crowd hushes. He declares, loud enough to wake the ancestors, that he is preparing to lead the kingdom into a glorious new era. His plans include doubling the feasts, building towers that touch the clouds, and yes, marrying the princess anew, as though their vows had long been broken. Gasps echo. You clench your fists until your knuckles ache. Here's a folkloric fact. Imposters often overreach at this stage. Their ambition stretches so far it tears open their disguise. Folklore thrives on this overconfidence. Think of false brides who demand weddings before the truth emerges, or boastful pretenders whose greed unmasks them. The bigger the claim, the harder the fall. The princess rises. She doesn't smile. Her voice is calm, steady as a river stone. "If you are truly my husband, prove it," she says. The room stills. The impostor blinks, clearly not expecting the challenge. You almost cheer, but swallow it down. This is her move, not yours. A quirky tidbit: in one obscure version of the story collected in Silesia, the princess proposes not a test of strength, but of memory, asking the impostor to recall a private word spoken on their wedding night. Naturally, he fails. Scholars argue this variation highlights intimacy as truth's final safeguard, something even a clever liar can't counterfeit. The scholarly debate here is juicy. Is the princess passive until this moment, or has she been laying the groundwork all along? Some argue her silence was tactical, letting the impostor build his own trap. Others insist Grimm's editors dulled her role when in oral tradition she was sharper, more active. Either way, you see now, she's been waiting, watching, ready to strike. The impostor stammers. He offers excuses, half laughs, tries to redirect the crowd with another tall tale. But the princess presses, her eyes locked on him. The room begins to murmur, the courtiers shifting in their seats. You feel the air thickened with anticipation, like a bowstring pulled tight. Your heart pounds. The unraveling has begun, and for the first time in days, you smile.
The hall is silent now, thick with the kind of tension that makes even the torches flicker uneasily. The impostor's grin is faltering, wobbling like butter left too long in the sun. He blusters, waves his hands, insists he's the rightful king, but the words tumble out too fast, too messy. The courtiers whisper. The guards glance at each other. The crowd's belief is slipping like sand through a sieve. And you, dusty, hungry, looking like you've been through 12 rounds with fate itself, decide this is your moment. You step from the shadows. Gasps ripple through the hall as you stride forward, shoulders squared, chin lifted, hay still probably sticking out of your hair like a crown of embarrassment. The impostor stares at you, eyes wide, as though you're a ghost who just walked in demanding rent. The princess's gaze finds yours. For the first time since your return, her face softens. Relief flickers across her features, quickly masked with regal composure. She turns to the crowd. Here, she declares, is the true king. Here's a folkloric fact. Recognition scenes in fairy tales often hinge on objects or tokens. In The Goose Girl, it's a talking horse that reveals the truth. In East of the Sun and West of the Moon, it's a test of endurance. Fairy tales rarely settle for simple declarations. They demand a sign, a proof, a spark of the miraculous. The impostor scoffs, but the princess is already reaching for the token she kept all these years, a ring, slipped onto your finger on your wedding day. She holds it up for all to see. If you are who you claim, she tells the impostor, this ring will fit you as it fits him. The impostor hesitates, but pride drives him forward. He snatches the ring, jams it onto his finger, and it sticks halfway, refusing to slide. He tugs, sweats, curses under his breath. The hall erupts in murmurs. The princess steps forward, takes the ring, and places it gently on your hand. It slides perfectly into place, gleaming as though it had been waiting for this very moment. A quirky tidbit. In some oral versions of the tale, it's not a ring but a phrase only the true husband knows, whispered in private years before. In others, it's a scar or a mark left by the enchanted dwarves. Folklorists can't agree whether tokens are meant to be literal proof or symbolic bridges between identity and memory. Either way, they work, and in this moment, the proof is undeniable. The scholarly debate, however, digs deeper. Is the impostor's failure meant to shame him personally, or to remind the community how easily they were duped? Some suggest the real moral isn't be patient and you'll be restored, but don't believe every loudmouth with a crown, which frankly still applies beautifully to modern politics. The crowd erupts now, not in cheers, not yet, but in a wave of realization. They glance between you and the impostor, whispers building into shouts. The impostor tries to bolt, but guards seize him. He struggles, snarling, but the performance is over. His curtain has dropped. And you, still in your ragged cloak, stomach rumbling, hair a bird's nest, finally straighten your back. The weight of 12 years, of betrayal, of erasure, lifts just slightly. You are seen. You are heard. You are home.
The impostor thrashes, his protests shrill and hollow, but the crowd has turned. Guards drag him forward, his crown tumbling from his head with a clatter that echoes through the vaulted hall. For once, you don't even feel the urge to make a sarcastic aside. Some sounds speak for themselves. The princess steps to your side, her hand brushing yours, steady and sure. You returned, she whispers, not in disbelief, but with a quiet pride that steadies your knees. 12 years apart, 12 years of longing, and here you stand, dirt on your boots, hay in your hair, yet whole again. Here's a folkloric fact. In Grimm tales, justice usually arrives swiftly and firmly. Impostors are punished with exile, humiliation, or, if the editor had a particularly sharp quill, darker fates best left vague at bedtime. The key point is restoration. The rightful order of the world reasserts itself, like a compass snapping back to north. The impostor begs, pleads, insists he only did what any ambitious man would. The courtiers murmur. The princess raises her hand, silencing them. You sought to steal not only a crown but a life. That cannot stand. The guards haul him away, his voice shrinking into the distance like a badly tuned trumpet finally fading. A quirky tidbit, in one Silesian telling, the impostor isn't punished at all. He's simply banished, vanishing into the woods where he becomes a wandering trickster in other tales. Folklorists note how often characters bleed across stories, like actors recycling roles in a never-ending repertory. The scholarly debate here lingers on the ending itself. Is this triumph meant to comfort listeners, assuring them that truth always prevails?
Or is it a warning about how fragile identity is, how easily it can be stolen if not guarded? Some argue it's both, a reassurance wrapped in a reminder. But debate fades when the princess places the crown back upon your head. The hall erupts in cheers, a sound rolling like waves against stone. Children peer from balconies, villagers press forward, nobles bow their heads. For the first time in years, you feel the weight of the crown as both burden and balm. The feast that follows is not loud, but steady, warm, a hum of voices rising in gratitude rather than spectacle. And though your hunger gnaws, you taste each bite as if rediscovering food itself. The princess sits beside you, her smile small but luminous, and for once, silence feels like the richest gift. You glance toward the high windows, where the moon spills light across the hall. The impostor's shadow is gone, the ring glitters on your hand, and your story is once again your own.
The hall grows quieter as the night deepens, torches dimming until their glow is little more than a soft amber haze along the stone walls. The cheers fade, the footsteps scatter, and one by one the sounds of celebration settle into silence. You sit still for a long while, feeling the crown's gentle weight upon your head, yet no longer as a burden. Tonight it rests like a reminder of patience, of trials endured, of a path winding always back to the truth. The princess remains beside you, her hand resting lightly in yours, neither of you needing words. Around you, the echoes of the feast linger like the faint warmth of a fire gone low, comforting but not demanding attention. The hall breathes quietly, as if the stone itself is sighing with relief, and you find yourself matching its rhythm, each breath longer, slower, softer. Outside, the wind curls against the towers, a low hush like the sea's distant murmur. The stars glimmer faintly overhead, scattered silver across the dark, keeping watch as they have through every turn of your story. The night is steady now, unhurried, each moment stretching like the calm ripples of a lake under moonlight. You let your shoulders sink, your hands rest, your eyes half close. The impostor is gone, the struggle behind you, and what remains is stillness. Stillness within the hall, within the kingdom, within yourself. And so, as the last torch flickers low and the moonlight settles across stone and crown alike, you drift gently into the quiet. The journey is complete, the tale has softened, and the night carries you onward toward rest. Good night, traveler. Sweet dreams, sweet dreams, sweet dreams.